Hello everyone, Bardic Nerd here, coming to you with a guide for Millennia in my series of guides about the Millennia governments. This one is about the Age 3 governments. So, in Age 3, we get our first choice of government. If we did not take the Nomad start, if we took the Nomad start, then we would have had a choice of 2 governments in Age 1, which I go over in my previous guide. With here we have 2 governments that are geared towards 2 different play styles. One that lends itself more towards tall, and the other that lends itself more towards wide. Both have definite use cases and benefits to them, so you should choose what works best for your situation. Let's look at both. Imperial Dynasty, first of all, is well suited for tall play, or if for whatever reason you don't have many vassals. It is fine if you are intending to go wide. There are no drawbacks to it, and you'll still get bonuses. So this can make a good default if you're not sure you'll have a lot of vassals to get bonuses from Kingdom. The buffs to each region are slightly higher than they are for Kingdom, though not by much. The government's real strength lies in improving one single region, though it does give some other decent buffs as well, just generally not as impactful. It is worth noting that half the abilities, the ones on this side down here, do significantly improve the region in which you construct your palace, which you're able to do once you get the first ability, which is a building that you are able to spawn via spending government XP. By default, the palace gives some government XP and influence, but the abilities in this government tree improve it potentially very significantly. You can only ever have a single palace. So 5 grains, first of all, up here, gives a minor buff to farms, slightly increasing the food they produce. My initial experience was that it only affected the improvements that are specifically called farms and not other agricultural improvements, such as plantations that do also produce food. That has been my experience, but this might have gotten changed. So just keep an eye on that. So while this is not a big bonus, but it is certainly nice to have. It's relatively minor, but I'm not going to turn my nose up at it. State prosperity here, that improves the region level of the capital in which you build the palace. It's not a hugely important thing, but it's something. Feng Shu up here gives a buff to housing improvements, increasing by 1 the amount of housing they provide. Again, that's not a lot, but it is something, and, nice to have. Production mandate. Here, this gives 1 production on the palace for every 2 population in the region it is. So obviously, how much this ends up being is going to vary a bit, but certainly it can end up being significant. You'll likely have 10 pop or so when you first take the government, and by the time you're starting to look at Age 5 governments, probably 20 or more. Probably not a lot more, but in theory you could. So my conservative estimate is this will provide you with 5 to 10 production. That's not huge, but it's not insignificant either. So, certainly nice. City sewers here provides a +1 bonus to the amount of sanitation that each sanitation improvement provides. That's a 25% boost to the passive sanitation gained from the initial sanitation improvements, which are the ones you'll have when you have this government type, most likely. That's not a huge game-changing boost, but it is one that is worth noting. It's gonna make your life easier. It's definitely gonna make your life easier. These 3 are just like They're nice, progressively better improvements to your quality of life. So, definitely not gonna be game changers, but they're gonna make things better for you, certainly. Then we get to knowledge mandate. Knowledge mandate. This is probably the reason to take the government. Um, if you have your eggs mostly in one basket, it makes that basket that much better by giving you a large boost to knowledge. This gives you 1 knowledge for every 5 pops in the region with the capital, which will likely range between 2 to 4 conservatively knowledge that you get from it. But potentially more if you put more effort into building the population of your primary region. Gaining things that increase your knowledge is very important in this game, and it can be difficult to get in the early stages of the game. So when you get this, it is likely to be quite impactful. Um, it's hard to say exactly how much this is going to improve your knowledge by percentage wise, but it'll be a reasonable amount, at least at first, until you get more knowledge stuff online. So it's definitely very good. The final government ability here unlocks the same reformed ability as per all governments. As an Imperial Dynasty, you can get an innovation event that gives you +1 culture on the palace. That's not a big bonus, but it's a nice one. It's a nice one to have, even if it's not big. Overall, the government is easy to use and always helpful. You're not ever going to really get less bonuses by failing to pursue a specific playstyle with this government, so it does make a good default. The potential payoffs from it can be less, so if you can make Kingdom pay, I do suggest you consider going for that. But there are many situations where this is the right choice, and generally it's also just simpler and easy to make use of its bonuses. So that is Imperial Dynasty. Alright, Kingdom. So Kingdom relies on having vassals. Basically all of its abilities are geared towards vassals in some way, to greater or lesser extent. It can use them to very good effect, but without them, or at least without the intent to get vassals, it's mostly useless. If you have a lot of them, though, it's very, very good. So it allows you to build the Seat of Power building in each region that you directly control, which gives a little government XP and 1 diplomacy XP, both of which will be helpful for the playstyle promoted by this government. Province settlers here reduces the cost to create settlers by 30%, which if you're going to make more than 1 settler after buying this ability, it's likely to be a net reduction in government XP spent. So you might have to do more than just 1. Settlers are initially 30 and they go up, so this costs 30 to get. You might have to get 3 settlers for it to be a reduction, but it's still going to help. You probably shouldn't get it if you're only going to make 1 settler after this, but if you're going to be making 2, you should consider it. If you're going to be making 3, then it's definitely going to make your life better. So if you are going to do that, it's worth it. If not, it's not worth it. Sometimes settlers aren't actually needed. I've played games where I've never spawned any, but sometimes they're really useful, so your mileage may vary. Province annexers down here, similar thing for diplomats. Reduces the cost for spawning diplomats by 30%, just like this reduces the cost for settlers by 30%. This can often be useful So as with settlers, sometimes you use them, sometimes you don't. Generally speaking, I've found I get more diplomats than settlers. Diplomats are needed to peacefully take over neutral cities, and are of course needed if you want to do advanced diplomacy with other nations or to enable trade, and very often you do want that. So I highly recommend this. It is worth noting that diplomats are spawned using diplomacy XP and not government XP. And it is government XP that unlocks this ability. So if for some reason you have an excess of diplomacy XP and a shortage of government XP, you might want to skip this. But usually at this stage of the game, you make more government XP than diplomacy XP. Not always, but usually. Then we have Immortals, which gives you a power that you can spend some government XP. I believe it is 20 government XP to spawn some spear units. 20 that increases depending upon how many times you use it. Spawn some spear units at one of your vassals. It could sometimes save you in a tough situation, but generally speaking, it's not long until you get better units, and this becomes not very useful. I rarely end up using this, so for most games, I generally recommend skipping over this ability. Usually in most games, I just go province annexers and skip both of these, because once you get one from this tier, you can go on to this tier. But it depends. It depends. Sometimes you want these, sometimes you don't. So, Reap Scutellage. Here. This gives you an ability that you can spend government XP on to gain money from a vassal in exchange for reducing the vassal's prosperity. Unless you're desperate for money, this is almost never a good trade, as the amount of money it gives you is rather small, and money is generally not that impactful in my experience. Unless you're in dire straits, the amount this gives you will not be impactful in any case, really. It's just not really a huge thing. I think it gives you like 10 gold per pop multiplied by prosperity, so that's going to be at most in the low hundreds. At most in the low hundreds. Order research. This is like the above ability, but with knowledge. Now, knowledge is a lot more important than money, so while this is still pretty small, it's at least consistently useful. It's not going to be a big boost, but it'll be one that is helpful to have. And install Satrap, which is probably the main reason to take this government. The passive boost to vassal prosperity will make your vassals a lot more useful. It can help if you have a lot of vassals, and the cheaper diplomats, settlers, and military units that you get here can all help you get a lot of vassals. This can result in big boosts. Now, you can boost vassal prosperity in other ways, but it's often less annoying and cheaper to do so this way. And if you use other methods in conjunction with this, it'll speed things up a lot. Now, for the innovation event for Kingdom, there are actually two that you can get. So you could get one, you could get either one, you could get both potentially. One of them improves the attack of pre-gunpowder units against militia. That's often a useful thing. Not always, but pretty often that's a useful thing. It's not amazingly useful, but it's still useful. Just not really game-changingly useful. The other causes farming specialized towns to provide 4 more gold and 1 government XP. That's a nice bonus, if somewhat minor. It's somewhat minor, but it's definitely nice. But it's also not one that you'll always be making use of. depending upon how you specialize your towns, you might end up not having any farming towns for quite some time. Generally speaking, in the early game, I find it best to focus on lumber or mining towns to give my cities production. But overall, Kingdom can really help you grow your empire into a wide one with a number of vassals, and then it helps you get the most out of those vassals that you can get, which can give you a definite edge if you are able to use it to best ability. If you aren't able to use it well, though, it's definitely a mediocre government. So, Kingdom played right can give you a distinct advantage. However, if you are not able to leverage it well with multiple vassals that you intend to build up, it's really very subpar. While Imperial Dynasty will always give you at least decent results. Further, you can get the same thing as Kingdom gives you without having Kingdom via other means. Kingdom just makes it simpler and cheaper to do so. But it's by no means the only way to get lots of useful vassals. So you can ultimately get the same things with Imperial Dynasty that you get in Kingdom. Kingdom just makes it a bit easier to get those, so ultimately, like so many things in Millennia, you have multiple viable choices, and which one you'll get the most out of depends upon your situation, which is really one of the reasons I like this game so much. But if you're struggling to pick, I'd say Dynasty is usually the safer choice. But really, look at your situation, see what's going to be best in your situation, and make your choice based upon your situation with the information about what each government is best at. So that's all for this guide. Comment if you care to discuss what you think about the governments, what you want to see in future guides. Please do like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. I'm aiming to get a guide out once a week or so. So we're going to go with the rest of the governments for Millennia. So next week we will have the Age 5 governments. Then we will finally have the Age 8 governments. And then we will go on to another aspect of Millennia for guides. But that will be next week. Enjoy my Let's Plays in the meantime. Until then, take care.